Hello, friends. If you're curious about the movie Bad Boys for Life, 2020, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to give this video a quick like, it really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to stay updated on all the latest movie deep dives. Let's jump right in. It's been years since we first met Mike Lowrey and Marcus Burnett, the trigger-happy duo who turned the buddy cop genre into a full-blown adrenaline opera. Back then, in the sun-splashed chaos of 1995 and then again in 2003, the Bad Boys weren't just partners, they were a force of kinetic energy. Stylish, loud, impulsive, and bulletproof. But time has a way of catching up, even with the most relentless. And when Bad Boys for Life roared into theaters in 2020, it did so not as a nostalgia trip, but as a reinvention, one that dared to ask, what happens when even the wildest must grow up? Set 17 years after their last escapade, Bad Boys for Life doesn't waste time on ceremony. It drops us right back into the action. Only now, everything feels a little older, a little heavier. Marcus, played by the ever-hilarious Martin Lawrence, is flirting with retirement, dreaming of softer mornings and a life without bullet holes. He's grown tired of the sirens and the chase, leaning into the quiet that comes with age. He wants to be there for his family. He wants peace. But Mike Lowrey, Will Smith's eternally stylish and stubbornly invincible alter ego, isn't ready to hang it up. Not even close. Dressed to the nines, racing sleek cars through Miami's glowing streets, Mike clings to the past like it's the only part of him still real. But nostalgia isn't a shield. And neither is confidence. The real turning point comes fast. Too fast. A sniper's bullet cuts through the Miami night and rips through Mike's life, sending him to the brink of death and the edge of something more terrifying, vulnerability. For a moment, the unstoppable force is stopped. And in that space, the film pivots. Not away from action, but toward something deeper. Mortality. Legacy. Consequence. Because Bad Boys for Life isn't just another chapter. It's a reckoning. What unspools next is a twisting, breakneck unraveling of ghosts long thought buried. There's a new enemy on the rise, one more personal than any cartel or arms dealer. Isabel Aretas, the vengeful widow of a drug kingpin once locked away by Mike, emerges from the shadows with her son Armando, a deadly specter with skill, fury, and a mission. Destroy everything Mike Lowrey has ever touched. The beauty of the film lies in the collision of old and new. The directors, Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah, inject a fresh energy that doesn't overwrite the franchise's identity. It evolves it. We see the flashy shootouts, the sharp banter, the cinematic swagger Miami has always provided. But we also see something else. Slower scenes. Personal moments. Vulnerabilities cracking through the machismo. When Marcus prays beside Mike's hospital bed, there's no punchline. Just pain. Regret. Hope. And then, as the pace tightens, we meet AMMO, an elite tech-savvy task force of younger officers led by Rita, a former flame of Mike's. They're not replacements. They're reflections. A mirror held up to the old guard, showing them what the job has become. Drones instead of foot chases. Surveillance instead of gut instinct. Mike bristles. Marcus chuckles. And together, they stumble through the growing pains of realizing the world has changed, but justice hasn't. As the body count rises and the truth sharpens, Mike is forced to confront the sins of his past in ways he never expected. Because Armando isn't just another villain with a vendetta. He's family. Literally. A secret son born of a mission and a mistake, trained to hate the man who gave him life. It's the twist that rips through the heart of the film and redefines everything that came before it. Suddenly, Bad Boys for Life isn't just about catching bad guys. It's about redemption. It's about cycles of violence. About whether blood must always call for blood. This reveal isn't cheap. It's earned. It's layered with dread and sorrow and moments that ache. Watching Mike stare down a younger version of himself, a man raised without love, only rage, isn't just dramatic. It's mythic. And the film doesn't shy away from the emotional fallout. It leans in hard. But don't think for a second that it forgets to entertain. The action is still gloriously over the top. High-speed chases through neon-drenched streets. Explosions that ripple across the screen like firestorms. Hand-to-hand combat that feels less choreographed and more primal. The final act, set in a fortress-like compound, blends shootouts with soul-searching in a way few action movies ever dare. And in the end, as bullets fly and fires rage, what remains isn't just the destruction, it's the choice. The decision not to pull the trigger. The possibility of breaking the pattern. Marcus and Mike, battered but unbroken, stand in the debris of their past. There's no victory lap, just understanding. They've grown, not into different men, but into whole ones. And that growth echoes through the final moments, where the future is uncertain, but no longer feared. The film closes on a note that doesn't beg for another sequel. It dares to let the characters live beyond the credits. Whether or not they ride again is secondary. What matters is that they've finally seen themselves clearly. Bad Boys for Life is a rare thing, a franchise film that respects its history without being trapped by it. It delivers spectacle without sacrificing soul. And it brings its characters not just to the end of an arc, but to the start of something new. So if you came here expecting just another loud action flick, you're in for a surprise. Because this one hits different. This one remembers, and if you're ready to explore the full journey, every twist, every revelation, every flame-lit reckoning, then stick with us. We've only just begun to unpack the story behind the explosions. And trust me, you'll want to see where this road leads. The story begins with heat. Miami heat. The kind that sticks to your skin and slows time just enough for trouble to sneak in. The camera cuts through the coastal haze and straight into velocity. An Aston Martin roaring down Ocean Drive, slicing past palm trees and pastel-colored hotels. Behind the wheel, Mike Lowry, all style and fire, is grinning like he owns the city. In the passenger seat, Marcus Burnett clutches the dashboard with the panic of a man who knows his time in this game is nearly over. They're not racing toward a crime scene, not this time. They're racing toward a birth. Marcus's daughter just had her baby. It's a moment that should be full of joy, a signpost of life moving forward. But for Mike, it's a reminder that everything is moving except him. Marcus has his family, his next chapter. Mike only has the chase. It's clear from the start that something is shifting. Not in the city. In them. The scene inside the hospital is soft, warm, bathed in the laughter of friends and family. Marcus is glowing, basking in the kind of happiness you can't buy with a badge. And Mike, he's proud, he's smiling, but he's also distant. He doesn't belong in this quiet, in this softness. He belongs in the streets, chasing shadows. It's not that he doesn't want peace. It's that he doesn't believe it's meant for him. But shadows have long memories. And just as Mike tries to pretend he can outrun the past, it finds him. We cut to Mexico City, where something darker brews. A woman named Isabel Aretas, cloaked in silence and rage, breaks out of prison with chilling precision. She doesn't just want escape. She wants revenge. She's methodical, deadly, and she speaks with a kind of venom that infects everyone she touches. At her side is her son, Armando, a phantom in black, a ghost with a vendetta. His mission is clear: destroy the legacy of the man who tore their family apart. That man is Mike Lowry. Back in Miami, the celebrations fade. The streets start whispering. There's a hit list, and someone's crossing names off one by one. High-ranking figures, all connected to a case buried years ago, begin to fall. The method is surgical. The message, personal. Mike brushes it off at first. Denial is easier than grief. But denial doesn't last long. Because the next bullet is meant for him. It happens in an instant. Mike walking out of a bar, laughing, alive. Then a blur. A shot. He drops like the world just stopped turning. Blood spills into the street. Marcus's scream is the last thing we hear before everything fades to black. It should have been the end. But Mike survives. Barely. The hospital scenes are raw, stripped of gloss. No music cues. Just machines beeping and Marcus watching through glass, his best friend caught between life and something colder. The man who always led the charge, now unable to move. For Marcus, it's a reckoning. He makes a decision. No more violence. No more war. He retires on the spot. But Mike? He doesn't accept endings. He heals. Slowly, stubbornly. And as his body recovers, something harder begins to break inside. His belief that he's invincible. That he can keep living in fast cars and explosions without paying the price. For the first time, he looks into the mirror and sees a man who almost didn't make it. And he wants answers. With Marcus stepping away, Mike begins his own pursuit. Not sanctioned. Not official. Just personal. But Miami's not the same city anymore. Tech runs the streets now. Surveillance replaces shoe leather sleuthing. Enter AMMO, Advanced Miami Metro Operations, a new task force led by Rita, sharp, no-nonsense, and once Mike's lover. She runs a tight team. Kelly, Rafe, Dorn. Young, smart, analytical. They're everything Mike isn't. And they don't trust him. Mike doesn't care. He's not there to make friends. He's there to find a ghost. The ghost is Armando. And the bodies keep piling up. Each kill is meticulous, pointed. The victims scream a single name before they die, Mike. He's not just a target. He's the bullseye at the heart of something buried deep, something he doesn't fully remember. But Isabel remembers. And she's pulling the strings with the precision of someone who's been planning this for decades. As Mike and AMMO clash and circle each other, Marcus struggles with his new life. Peace isn't peaceful when your best friend is bleeding without you. When Mike shows up at Marcus's door, pleading for his help one last time, Marcus says no. At first. But then another name is crossed off the list. Another friend lost. The old fire sparks. The partnership reforms. But it's not the same. There's hesitation in Marcus's trigger finger now. There's doubt in Mike's stare. They're not the bad boys they once were. They're men on the edge of something much more human. The investigation leads them through the underbelly of Miami. Clubs, backrooms, cartels disguised in nightclubs. Every step closer to the truth brings them deeper into the past. Into operations they thought were sealed. Into betrayals they didn't see coming. And then the unthinkable happens. Armando attacks in broad daylight. The shootout is brutal. Glass shatters. Civilians scream. Mike chases him through the chaos, cornering him in a warehouse. They fight, fists colliding like memory and anger. Armando moves with purpose. Rage. Precision. He stabs Mike in the side, not to kill, but to leave a message. To let him live just long enough to understand why he has to die. The knife isn't just steel. It's a question. Who is Armando? And why does he hate Mike with such fire? The answers, it turns out, are older than the badge. And they're about to tear everything apart. The knife wound should have slowed him down. But for Mike Lowry, pain is just another kind of fuel. Stumbling back from the warehouse clash, blood soaking his shirt and fury igniting in his chest, he doesn't retreat, he rises. Because now, it's not just about revenge. It's about understanding why this ghost, this young assassin named Armando, moves through the world with a hatred that burns like history itself. Why he keeps whispering Mike's name like it's a curse that was always going to find him. The city hums around them, unaware that a storm is crawling its way through back alleys and bloodlines. AMMO steps up. Rita takes the lead, the team's clean-cut precision slicing through digital trails and encrypted dead ends. And even though Mike still clashes with their methods, preferring the grip of a pistol to the glow of a screen, he begins to listen. Begrudgingly. Because what they uncover next doesn't just change the mission. It changes the man. Isabel Aretas. The name comes up again and again, threaded through prison transcripts, old surveillance footage, whispers in cartel circles. She wasn't just a footnote in one of Mike's old cases. She was central. Years ago, under deep cover, Mike infiltrated the Aretas empire. He got close. Too close. He dismantled it from the inside. And when it fell, Isabel went to prison. Her husband died. And her son, Armando, was born. But here's the twist. Mike wasn't just the man who brought Isabel down. He was her lover. And Armando? He's his son. The revelation detonates like a silent bomb, not in the streets, but in Mike's eyes. Everything he thought he knew, about the mission, the enemy, even himself, fractures. He remembers the affair now. The manipulation disguised as intimacy. He remembers leaving it behind, cold and clinical. A closed chapter. But for Isabel, it was never closed. It was scorched. And she raised Armando not with lullabies, but with vengeance. The father has become the target of his own blood. Mike doesn't tell Marcus at first. The truth sits too heavy, curled like smoke in his lungs. But when the next attack hits, this time against AMMO headquarters, a full-scale ambush led by Armando himself, there's no room left for silence. The facility is torn apart. Glass rains down. Gunfire echoes like thunder. Rita is wounded. Dorn barely makes it out. And in the chaos, Mike comes face to face with the boy he unknowingly left behind. They fight. Brutally. Emotionally. No quips, no bravado, just fists and fire. But when Mike has a clear shot, he hesitates. And Armando sees it. Not as weakness. As recognition. And for the first time, his rage stutters. That's when Mike says it. I'm your father. Silence. Even the chaos seems to pause. Armando vanishes into the smoke. Not out of fear, but confusion. And that's more dangerous than hate. Because now, he doesn't know what he's fighting for. And neither does Mike. Marcus confronts Mike after the battle, furious that he kept it hidden. Not because he's betrayed the team, but because he's betrayed their bond. Mike always walked the edge, but this was a cliff. And Marcus needs to know, what's left of their friendship if secrets like this are allowed to fester? They argue. Hard. But what follows is one of the most honest moments in the film. Two men, once defined by their invincibility. And choosing, despite everything, to keep standing together. The team regroups. Rita, despite her injury, leads the charge. She pieces together Isabel's next move, a plan to escape the country using a private military convoy moving through the Yucatan under diplomatic cover. It's now or never. And despite Ammo's official orders to stand down, the team goes rogue. The final act unfolds like a fever dream in fire and sand. A mission to a decaying fortress, an old Aretas stronghold built over centuries, now reactivated for war. The visuals are stunning. Shadows dancing through archways, helicopters slicing the night, flames blooming against stone walls. It's here that Bad Boys for Life trades bullets for bloodlines. Mike and Marcus breach the stronghold with the AMMO crew backing them up. The firefight is fierce, but it's not the real battle. The real moment waits inside, beneath the compound, where Isabel and Armando are preparing to escape. Mike finds them. He doesn't shout, doesn't threaten. He pleads. He speaks not as a cop, not as a soldier, but as a father. I didn't know, he says. But I'm here now. You have a choice. Armando hesitates. He looks at Isabel, who raised him with fury, who loved him through indoctrination. She screams for him to shoot, to end the lie. But in that split second, something breaks. The boy beneath the killer surfaces. He lowers the gun. Isabel reaches for hers. And Marcus, old, loyal, resolute, fires first. Isabel falls. Not with drama. With finality. The chaos dies with her. In the aftermath, Armando is taken into custody. Not as a criminal, but as something more complex. A man who must now confront who he is, not who he was made to be. Mike doesn't visit him in the holding cell. Not yet. But the door's been cracked open. And that, in this world, is enough. Back in Miami, AMMO is rebuilt. Rita is promoted. The team finds its rhythm again. And Mike and Marcus? They sit on the beach, watching the waves roll in, for once without gunfire in the background. "I told you I was too old for this," Marcus says. Mike smirks. "But you came anyway." Marcus laughs. "You always drag me back." Mike nods. "Maybe next time, we go in as mentors. Not cowboys." Marcus raises an eyebrow. "You? A mentor?" Mike shrugs. "Bad boys grow up eventually." "Speak for yourself," Marcus says, sipping his soda. And there it is. Not the end of a partnership. Just the beginning of a different kind. Because Bad Boys for Life doesn't close the book with explosions. It ends with evolution. With two men finally realizing that legacy isn't what you leave behind in the streets. It's what you build in the people who walk them next. Bad boys. Always. But now. Bad men, too. Whole. Flawed. Still standing. Mike Lowry was always the storm. The engine of every chase, the bulletproof charm, the sharp suit wrapped around reckless conviction. But in Bad Boys for Life, 2020, the storm begins to slow. And as it does, we begin to see something we never expected. Not a hero, not a maverick, but a man. A man forced to reckon with the idea that invincibility might have been a mask all along. He still walks like a king, don't get that wrong. The streets of Miami still know the echo of his designer shoes. The smirk still cuts across his face like a signature. But there's something different now, a weight behind his eyes, a slight hesitation in his breath, like he's beginning to feel every bruise he's ever ignored. Mike isn't slowing down because he's weak. He's slowing down because he's haunted. Every high-octane moment in his past was a page torn out of a book he never read to the end. And now, the past has found its voice. Loud. Relentless. Will Smith, slipping back into the role with lived-in charisma, paints Mike not as a man past his prime, but as a man finally aware of it. And that's what makes this performance so magnetic. Because Mike isn't trying to be cool anymore. He's trying to be whole. And that's infinitely harder. His pain, physical, emotional, ancestral, climbs out of him like smoke through cracks. The bullet that nearly ends his life in the early chapters of the film isn't just a plot device. It's a reckoning. He's not afraid of dying. He's afraid of dying unfinished. And when the realization comes that the assassin gunning for him might be his own son, that's when Mike stops being just a character and becomes a cautionary tale. A man shaped by choices that never stopped echoing. Now, opposite him stands Marcus Burnett, the balance, the heart, the anchor. Where Mike burns, Marcus grounds. He's the laugh in the chaos, the sigh when the plan goes sideways. But in Bad Boys for Life, Marcus is more than comic relief. He is a man on the edge of a new kind of courage, the courage to let go. From the moment his grandson is born, something unlocks in him. A quiet yearning for peace, for softness, for days that don't end in sirens or bulletproof vests. Martin Lawrence leans into this with tenderness and restraint. There's a sadness to Marcus that we haven't seen before, a recognition that he's outlived too many good men, that adrenaline only gets you so far before it starts to steal pieces of your soul. When he retires, he means it. And when he returns, it's not out of loyalty to the badge, it's out of love for the man who stood beside him for decades. The dynamic between Mike and Marcus evolves with nuance. No longer just bickering brothers in arms, they feel like two halves of a fractured philosophy: action and contemplation, fury and faith. Their arguments cut deeper now. Their jokes land softer. There's a weariness in their friendship that makes it real. And when Marcus finally picks up a gun again, it's not a return to violence. It's a gesture of shared burden. A way of saying, if you're going to carry this, I won't let you carry it alone. But the soul of the film doesn't rest solely in the legacy characters. It pulses through the new blood, through AMMO and, more strikingly, through Armando. Armando, cloaked in black, moves like vengeance incarnate. But beneath the armor, he is not just a killer. He is a child raised on grief, fed fury like it was gospel. Jacob Scipio plays him with chilling intensity, each glance sharpened, each movement precise. Yet, there's something constantly shifting behind his eyes. Doubt. Confusion. A longing so buried, it only surfaces in flickers. He doesn't understand why he hesitates before pulling the trigger on Mike. He doesn't yet know that blood recognizes blood. What makes Armando such a compelling character is that he is not evil. He is engineered. Forged by Isabel Aretas in the name of revenge, molded not to think, but to avenge. And when he learns the truth, that the man he was sent to destroy is the father he never knew, it doesn't break him. It unravels him. Slowly, tragically, he becomes the story's deepest wound. The confrontation between Mike and Armando in the final act is less a battle and more a surrender. Not of power, but of pain. Mike, looking into his son's eyes, sees every mistake he buried. And Armando, standing on the edge of a life he never chose, sees not a target, but a man who might have loved him, if the world had been different. The film doesn't ask us to forgive him. It asks us to understand him. And in that understanding, Armando becomes one of the franchise's most layered figures. Not a villain, but a ghost given shape. Then there's Isabel. Solemn, vicious, unapologetically cold. Kate Del Castillo plays her like a woman carved from marble. She doesn't yell. She commands. Her fury is not wild. It's honed. She represents what happens when justice is denied and rage is weaponized. But even she is not without complexity. She speaks of loss not with tears, but with control. She raised Armando not with love, but with loyalty. And that, in the end, is her downfall, believing vengeance is more powerful than blood. The supporting cast, the members of AMMO, bring freshness and dimension. Rita, played with quiet strength by Paula Nunez, isn't just a love interest or a team leader. She's a woman navigating the fine line between strategy and emotion. Her past with Mike is hinted at, never exploited. She's not defined by it. She's defined by her command, her clarity, and her ability to lead without losing herself. Rafe, Charles Melton, Kelly, Vanessa Hudgens, and Dorn, Alexander Ludwig, each bring contrast to the veteran duo. Rafe's arrogance hides competence. Kelly's youth hides compassion. Dorn's tech savviness masks brute strength. They don't just represent the next generation of crime fighters, they represent the evolution of the idea that justice doesn't have to come from the barrel of a gun. They learn from Mike and Marcus. But they also teach them. That growth doesn't mean surrender. That change doesn't mean weakness. That legacy is not about holding the torch, but about passing it with purpose. And in that exchange, the true character arc of the film is revealed. Bad Boys for Life is not about the pursuit of bad guys. It's about the pursuit of meaning. It's about men who once defined themselves by adrenaline now defining themselves by accountability. It's about facing the ghosts they made and the ones they became. And in that stillness, when the fires have dimmed and the streets have emptied, we see them not as legends or icons, but as men, fathers, friends, human, imperfect, but finally real. Sometimes a movie leaves its mark not just on the screen, but behind it, in the heat between takes, in the jokes that never made it to the final cut, in the strange, wonderful chaos that follows a production running full speed on instinct and nostalgia. Bad Boys for Life, 2020, may have arrived nearly 2 decades after the last explosive chapter in Mike Lowry and Marcus Burnett's saga, but what unfolded behind the scenes was just as unpredictable, curious, and unforgettable as anything seen on camera. This wasn't just a sequel, it was a resurrection. And, as you're about to discover, the stories that came with it are as wild as the ones they told. Let's start at the very beginning, the kind of beginning that almost didn't happen. The return of the Bad Boys franchise had been whispered about for years, passed around studios like an old family story that nobody wanted to tell unless the stars aligned just right. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence had both said it. They wouldn't come back unless the script meant something. It wasn't enough to blow up buildings and chase bad guys. There needed to be a soul. And for a long time, that story didn't exist. Multiple drafts were written. Multiple directors attached and left. The third installment almost became one of those Hollywood legends that would never actually happen. Until a directing duo from Belgium walked through the door and flipped the entire equation. Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah weren't the expected choice. Young, relatively unknown to American audiences, and fearless in their approach, they brought something new to the table. Energy, reverence, and most of all, respect for the franchise. But here's the strange part. They never believed they would actually get the job. In fact, they showed up to their first pitch with a plan to sneak a selfie with Will Smith and tell everyone back home they met the Fresh Prince. Instead, they left with a handshake deal to direct a $90 million sequel to one of the most iconic action series of all time. Then came the casting surprises. Jacob Scipio, who plays the haunting and deadly Armando, didn't even realize he was auditioning for the role of Mike Lowry's son. In early reads, the script was so heavily protected and redacted that character names were replaced with initials, and plot details were swapped out. Scipio was told the role was a mid-level antagonist. It wasn't until his second chemistry read with Will Smith that someone finally whispered, "By the way, you're his kid." His reaction was reportedly caught on camera, and according to the crew, he sat in stunned silence for 10 whole seconds before saying, "Oh, no pressure then." Martin Lawrence's return was a whole odyssey of its own. After years of stepping back from major film roles, Lawrence was hesitant. Not because he didn't love Marcus Burnett, but because he wasn't sure he could step back into the rhythm after so long. On the first day of shooting, there was real anxiety. But when he and Will stepped into that familiar car, lines flying, insults traded with that unmistakable sync, they both broke down laughing. The chemistry hadn't faded. It had only matured. And from that moment on, Lawrence said, it felt like coming home. Filming in Miami was as much a reunion as it was a logistical circus. One of the strangest challenges? The heat. Several of the major scenes, including the thrilling rooftop chases and downtown shootouts, were filmed in July under a heat index that hovered over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Will Smith, ever the showman, insisted on doing many of his own stunts. During one particularly long chase scene, Smith sprinted across 3 rooftops, no doubles, no wires, wearing a designer leather jacket. The jacket, by the way, was not designed for action. Between takes, the costume team had to use portable fans and ice packs sewn into the lining just to keep it from sticking to his skin. But that wasn't the weirdest costume-related event. That honor goes to the disappearing shoes. During the filming of a nightclub infiltration scene, Martin Lawrence's character was supposed to wear a pair of sleek, reflective-soled dress shoes. The problem? They vanished. Just gone. The wardrobe department turned the set inside out. A city-wide search began. Crew members swore they saw a local extra wearing them during a rehearsal. The shoes never resurfaced. In the final cut of the film, Marcus is wearing completely different footwear, because no one could find the original pair, and the replacements had to be spray-painted to match at the last minute. Then there was the drone incident. One of the film's most dynamic action sequences involved AMMO using aerial drones to track suspects through a crowded urban alley. The sequence was partly choreographed with actual autonomous drones, small, nimble, and equipped with real-time camera feeds. One day, during test runs, a rogue pigeon, yes, a pigeon, intercepted one of the drones mid-flight. The bird survived, the drone did not. The footage, shaky, blurry, then suddenly filled with feathers, was later edited into the dailies by the editors as a prank. It played for the cast during a lunch break to roaring laughter. Post-production came with its own set of curious turns. The film's editors discovered an anomaly in the audio during the climactic shootout at the fortress. In one particular take, a crew member had accidentally left a walkie-talkie turned on in their pocket, and it picked up several minutes of candid backstage chatter. You could hear extras arguing about sandwiches. One of the assistant directors singing Rihanna under their breath. At one point, someone can be heard whispering, "This is going to be better than Bad Boys 2, watch." The clip became a cherished inside joke, nicknamed the Gospel of Sandwich, and is rumored to be hidden in the final sound mix, barely audible at high volume during one of the explosions. And speaking of explosions, there's a spectacular sequence late in the film where the compound erupts in a blaze of destruction. That explosion? It was almost too real. The blast was supposed to be a controlled wall of flame no higher than 15 feet. It reached 30. The shockwave knocked over a dozen set lights and even triggered a car alarm 2 blocks away. No one was hurt, but Will Smith reportedly stood in stunned silence, then broke into applause. "Now that's Michael Bay energy," he joked, though Bay, of course, did not direct this installment. In fact, Bay himself makes a blink-and-you-miss-it cameo as a wedding MC earlier in the film. A handoff. A blessing. An Easter egg of legend. The strangest fact, though, might be the quietest one. Despite the film's high-octane energy, some of its most emotional beats were unscripted. In one scene where Marcus and Mike sit on a beach after everything has burned down, Marcus begins to hum a tune, soft, unrecognizable. That moment wasn't in the script. Martin Lawrence was humming to calm himself during a long take, and Will Smith responded in kind. The director kept rolling. The scene stayed. It's one of the quietest moments in the film, but it carries the most weight. And perhaps that's what's most surprising about Bad Boys for Life, that a movie so steeped in legacy and adrenaline would allow itself to breathe. That beneath the gunfire and the style, there was room for silence, for surprise, for the kind of strange little accidents that make art feel like life. So next time you watch, look a little closer. Listen for the humming. Watch for the painted shoes. Notice the camera angles that feel just a little too perfect to be choreographed. Because behind the explosions and the swagger, Bad Boys for Life was a film stitched together by lightning, laughter, lost shoes, and the stubborn, beautiful truth that some stories just refuse to end. They evolve. And in every strange fact, every unexpected glitch, you see the spirit of something bigger than nostalgia. You see two legends finding their rhythm again, not because they had to, because they wanted to. And the result? Well, you already know. Bad Boys for Life. For real. There are action films that punch hard, dazzle bright, and vanish into the blur of box office history. Then there are those that slow you down in unexpected moments, forcing you to sit with what you're feeling even while the bullets fly. Bad Boys for Life, 2020, was not supposed to be one of those films. A late-stage sequel, over 15 years after the last, carrying the weight of nostalgia and the baggage of a genre that so often chooses spectacle over substance. And yet, it delivered something different. Something richer. Beneath the explosions and the banter, it carried themes that critics didn't just notice, they felt. And through its carefully built events, it earned not only its place in the franchise, but in the conversation. One of the earliest and most crucial turning points in the film is Mike Lowry's shooting. From a narrative standpoint, it's a bold opening gambit. You take your most untouchable character, the invincible action hero, and you break him. Not in a slow burn, not in the emotional finale, but at the start. Critics pointed to this moment as the film's thesis statement. It was a cinematic surrender of ego. A declaration that this wasn't going to be the same boys riding high adrenaline fantasy. This was going to be about cost, about age, about reckoning with the truth that even the most confident can bleed. That single event ripples through the rest of the film's structure like a stone dropped into still water. It shifts the tone from comedy action to something more existential. And in doing so, it reframes the entire dynamic between Mike and Marcus. Marcus, who had already been inching toward retirement, now finds himself staring directly at the fragility of their lifestyle. The shooting forces the question: what have they actually built with all this bravado? What's left after the mission ends? For critics, this shift in tone was not just a pleasant surprise, it was a bold narrative decision that elevated the film. The Hollywood Reporter called it a clever deflation of the traditional hero myth. The Atlantic praised it as a moment of genuine vulnerability in a genre allergic to it. And audiences responded, too. This wasn't just fun anymore, it was human. Another significant event, loaded with thematic weight, is the introduction of AMMO. The younger, more tech-savvy task force isn't just a contrast to Mike and Marcus, it's a commentary. Thematically, AMMO represents the future. Not just of law enforcement, but of narrative evolution. They're diverse, analytical, measured. They solve problems with drones and digital footprints. Mike's discomfort with them isn't just generational, it's symbolic. He's staring down the reality that the world no longer runs on instinct alone. That heroism now comes with software updates and chain-of-command meetings. The film doesn't villainize this shift, nor does it mock it. Instead, it integrates it into the story's arc. By the final act, Mike learns to trust them, not because he's lost his edge, but because growth means accepting that there are other ways to lead. That scene where he follows Rita's orders during a raid? That's not just character development. It's thematic surrender. A nod to legacy that doesn't just rely on passing the torch, but on honoring it. Of course, the most seismic moment in the film, the twist that redefines everything, is the revelation that Armando is Mike's son. Critically, this twist walks a delicate line. On paper, it could have derailed the narrative into soap opera territory. But it doesn't. Because the film plays it not for shock, but for tragedy. It takes what was a straightforward revenge plot and makes it a meditation on blood and consequence. Mike, so used to compartmentalizing his life into good and bad, justice and villainy, is now forced to look into the eyes of a killer and see himself. From a critical lens, this moment is where the film cements its emotional intelligence. Variety described it as a reveal that doesn't twist the story, it deepens it. It's a callback to classic storytelling, a father confronting the sins of his past, a son raised in the shadow of a lie. But it's also a break from tradition. Because here, the revelation doesn't lead to redemption through violence. It leads to hesitation, to mercy. And that's where the film truly diverges from its predecessors. In previous Bad Boys entries, resolution came through bigger explosions, more bullets, more bravado. Here it comes through choice. Mike chooses not to kill Armando. Armando chooses not to kill Mike. And Marcus, the emotional compass of the film, chooses to step back into the fray, not for adrenaline, but for friendship. These choices are subtle, quiet, but they resound with consequence. The final confrontation at the fortress, a visually stunning, high-stakes battle, might feel like typical blockbuster territory. But it's threaded with restraint. Every gunfight is weighed with emotional tension. Every decision feels like a ripple in the water. And when the dust settles, it's not the fire that we remember. It's the silence. The death of Isabel Aretas, too, carries symbolic weight. She represents the poison of unprocessed grief. Her entire arc is built around the lie that revenge restores balance. And when she's finally confronted by the truth, that Armando has agency, that pain doesn't justify cycles of violence. She falls not just physically, but thematically. Her final moments are devoid of glory. She is not mourned. She is not absolved. She is a warning. And so we arrive at the resolution, a place so unfamiliar for the genre that it caught many critics off guard. There is no triumphant hero's march. No slow-motion victory pose. Just Mike and Marcus on a beach, looking toward a future they can no longer predict. It's quiet. It's reflective. And it's earned. This ending stirred critical conversation. Some praised it for its maturity, its refusal to regurgitate the same climactic formula. Others questioned whether a franchise built on velocity could really shift gears into introspection. But the consensus was clear. This was a sequel that dared. It dared to let its characters grow. It dared to reimagine what closure could look like. And in doing so, it turned a franchise known for its noise into a film remembered for its resonance. The thematic through-line, aging, legacy, accountability, touched something rare in the genre. It asked, what happens when the action stops? Who do we become after the mission ends? For Mike Lowry, the answer was hard-won self-awareness. For Marcus Burnett, it was the piece of choosing his battles. For audiences, it was a reminder that evolution doesn't betray the past. It honors it. And for critics, it was a revelation. That maybe the bad boys weren't just back. Maybe they were finally real. Sometimes, the most explosive stories aren't in the script. They're behind the camera, hiding in the late-night takes, the spilled coffee on call sheets, and the last-second rewrites done with a prayer and a Red Bull. Bad Boys for Life, 2020, might have come screaming onto the screen with bullets, car chases, and larger-than-life characters, but its real miracle? That it was made at all. What unfolded during the creation of this long-awaited third chapter was not just a feat of filmmaking. It was a story of perseverance, improvisation, and the deep, lived-in rhythm of a team rediscovering its soul. The road to Bad Boys for Life was long, winding, and filled with more detours than a high-speed chase through downtown Miami. After Bad Boys 2 in 2003, the franchise went quiet. 4 years, the third installment floated like a ghost through studio meeting rooms, occasionally surfacing in trade headlines. Bad Boys 3 back in talks, or Will Smith confirms interest, only to vanish again. What kept delaying it wasn't money. It was meaning. Both Will Smith and Martin Lawrence made it clear, if they were going to step back into these roles, it had to matter. It couldn't just be a rehash of old one-liners and car flips. The world had changed. So had they. Then came a pair of young, hungry Belgian filmmakers. Adil El Arbi and Bilall Fallah weren't the obvious choice. Known mostly for their gritty urban dramas overseas, they didn't have blockbuster resumes. But what they did have was passion, and a deep respect for the original films. When they came to their pitch meeting, they didn't show slides or storyboards. They told a story. About legacy. About heroes aging in real time. About action films that didn't pretend to be ageless. It wasn't a sales pitch. It was a mission statement. The studio bit. So did Will. So did Martin. And just like that, Bad Boys for Life had its heartbeat. From day one, the directors made it clear, they weren't here to replace Michael Bay. They were here to honor what he built, while gently steering it into new emotional territory. But Bay's fingerprints are still all over the film, especially during that now iconic wedding scene where he makes a blink-and-you'll-miss-it cameo as the master of ceremonies. That wasn't scripted. It wasn't planned. Bay just showed up, got handed a tux, and said, "Let's roll." The torch had officially been passed. Filming began in Atlanta and Miami, and immediately, the production felt different. The energy wasn't frantic, it was familiar. Will Smith arrived on set like a general returning to his battlefield. His very presence steadied the crew, many of whom had grown up on the original films. Martin Lawrence was quieter, more introspective, but just as sharp when the camera rolled. Their chemistry didn't need warming up. It clicked on sight, like two old friends falling back into a dance only they knew how to do. But even perfect rhythm couldn't stop the chaos of production. One of the first major headaches came during the explosive downtown motorcycle chase. The scene required an entire section of street to be shut down for 3 nights. On the second night, a miscommunication between the city and the crew meant that a construction crew showed up, jackhammers in hand, ready to dig up the very pavement they were filming on. A standoff ensued. Walkie-talkies buzzed. Tempers flared. In the end, the directors charmed their way out of the conflict by inviting the workers to be extras in the crowd scene later that week. Several of them appear in the background, still in hard hats. Then there was the helicopter. The final act of the film takes place in and around a crumbling fortress in Mexico, and it required a series of helicopter shots timed with pyrotechnics. Everything had been rehearsed. The timing was perfect. Until, mid-take, a local hawk flew directly into the shot, hovering inches from the camera drone. The entire take had to be scrubbed. But when the crew looked at the footage later, the hawk's wings cut across the lens so perfectly, so cinematically, that it was re-edited into a separate slow-motion transition. What was a ruined take became a moment of accidental brilliance. One of the most emotionally heavy scenes, Mike's bedside moment in the hospital, almost didn't make it into the film. Originally, the script called for a quick, efficient cutaway to show that Mike had survived the shooting. But on set, Martin Lawrence stopped mid-take and said, Originally, the script called for a quick, efficient cutaway to show that Mike had survived the shooting. But on set, Martin Lawrence stopped mid-take and said he wouldn't walk away that fast. Not from this. What followed was a reworking of the entire sequence. More silence, more stillness, more space to let Marcus's fear breathe. Lawrence's instinct, rooted in character truth, led to one of the film's most powerful scenes. Behind the scenes, Smith and Lawrence worked like co-directors of energy. Will was hands-on with everything, reviewing playback, suggesting tweaks to blocking, even rewriting his lines on the fly to better fit the moment. One night, while rehearsing a key scene between Mike and Rita, Will paused and said, "This doesn't feel like it's been lived in." The writers huddled for an hour. What emerged was a rewritten exchange about fear, love, and letting go, small lines that changed everything about their chemistry. Lawrence brought balance. He was the calming presence, the emotional truth-teller. He often invited younger cast members into his trailer to rehearse, share advice, or just decompress. Paula Nunez, Rita, called him the anchor, and said that during one particularly tense shoot, he handed her a folded piece of paper that just said, "Trust your stillness." She kept it in her wallet. The supporting cast found their own rhythm quickly. Alexander Ludwig, Charles Melton, and Vanessa Hudgens, the new AMMO crew, brought levity and grit. They trained with real tactical teams, spent weeks learning how to move and shoot as a unit. Ludwig, the gentle giant, was known for doing yoga between takes to calm his nerves. Melton would break into impromptu dance routines when the camera reset. And Hudgens, the sharpest shot of the bunch, actually fired live rounds on a range to prep for her role. "She's scary good," one of the stunt coordinators said. And speaking of stunts, the film's action design was led by a team of international stunt coordinators who approached every set piece like a short film. The motto was, "No action for action's sake." Every punch had to reveal something. Every chase had to push the story. The rooftop scene where Mike leaps from building to building? Smith trained for weeks, including sessions with parkour athletes. On the day of the jump, he did it himself. No wires. No double. Just raw adrenaline and total control. The editors faced their own kind of marathon. With hundreds of hours of footage, much of it unscripted improvisation, The post-production team had to carve a narrative that was both tight and tender. One editor called it editing jazz. Scenes were rearranged. Dialogue was repurposed. In one case, a throwaway joke about retirement became a motif, threaded through several scenes to underline Marcus's journey. The editing suite became a second writer's room, where story and structure were treated like sculpture, shaped slowly, with care. And through all of it, the directors never lost the heartbeat. Adil and Bilall were known for filming scenes twice, once by the book, once off the leash. They encouraged play. They trusted instinct. During a key moment where Marcus and Mike stare down a cartel lieutenant, the line, "We ride together, we die together," was meant to be delivered seriously. But Lawrence, feeling the weight of the moment, added, "But maybe not today." It cracked up the entire crew, and stayed in the final cut. In the end, Bad Boys for Life was more than a sequel. It was a film forged by memory and momentum, by actors who knew their characters better than ever, by a crew that believed in letting the story breathe, by accidents that became art, and by a set that didn't just echo with gunshots, but with laughter, trust, and the stubborn belief that some things are worth waiting for. Because this wasn't just about the past. It was about honoring it. And in every frame soaked in Miami sunlight and shadow, you feel it. The legacy of Bad Boys, reborn. One scene at a time. Some cities are backdrops. Others are characters. In Bad Boys for Life, 2020, Miami isn't just the stage, it's the soul. Hot pavement, neon-lit skies, and salt-sweet air pressing down like a second skin. Every shot in this film hums with place, with texture, with a heartbeat that's uniquely Floridian, yet cinematic in a way that transcends geography. And it's not just about where the camera points. It's how it listens to the streets, how it breathes with the shadows, how it lets light become part of the story. From the very first scene, we're reintroduced to this world through motion. Not exposition. Not dialogue. Just a blur of palm trees and chrome. Mike Lowry's car cuts through the Miami streets like he's never left. He's still slick, still sharp. But the city around him has changed. There's construction where clubs used to be. Sky-high condos where dive bars once ruled the night. That's not just urban growth, it's thematic scaffolding. Because Bad Boys for Life is about exactly that, a city and two men, caught between memory and movement. The cinematography, led by Robrecht Havert, plays this duality like a melody. Miami is filmed with love, but not nostalgia. Instead of the oversaturated glossy postcard visuals of the early 2000s, we get a palette of golds, deep blues, and bruised purples. The colors here feel. They linger. They mean something. Dusk isn't just a transition. It's a mood. And nighttime doesn't just mean danger, it means history. Take the way the camera follows Mike at night. It doesn't chase. It stalks. Wide shots give way to over-the-shoulder intimacy. Reflections in windows double his figure, because this isn't a man alone, it's a man haunted by what he used to be. When Marcus walks beside him, the lighting softens slightly. Warm street lamps cast amber halos. Their friendship, still intact, still glowing, becomes its own visual language. Contrast that with the scenes involving AMMO. The task force headquarters is sleek, cold, steel and glass precision. It's all control, all clarity. The lighting is clinical. White screens, glowing panels, everything bright and in focus. It's effective, but emotionally distant. You can almost feel the temperature drop when you cut from the Miami streets to the AMMO office. And that's the point. These are two worlds, intuition and innovation, locked in orbit around each other. Then there's Mexico. The film's climax shifts to a new setting entirely, an ancient stone fortress built into the cliffside. But this isn't just a location swap. It's symbolic. The fortress, half crumbling and firelit, becomes the visual embodiment of the past. It's grand, dangerous, beautiful, and falling apart. The lighting here goes full elemental, flickering torches, shadows slicing across walls, smoke curling into moonlight. It's cinematic as hell, but it's also metaphorical. This is where Mike must face the ruins of his own secrets. The set isn't just dramatic. It means something. Every major location in the film carries that same weight. There's the hospital, where Mike lays unconscious after being shot. Most hospital scenes in action films are throwaway, cold, sterile. Not here. The room is dim, lit by the flicker of monitors and Marcus's quiet prayers. It's a space not just of recovery, but of reckoning. When Marcus decides to retire, he does it not out in the field, but here, in the hush of beeping machines and reflection. The setting frames the choice. And then there's the beach. It's not a set piece. No guns. No chase. Just sand, waves, and two men watching the horizon. It's one of the most emotionally resonant scenes in the film, and it only works because the space is honest, open, peaceful. The chaos is behind them now. And the beach, long used as a symbol of escape in cinema, here becomes a symbol of acceptance. They're not running. They're resting. Visually, the film balances kinetic energy with stillness in a way that feels deliberate, even poetic. Camera movements are fluid but not frantic. Action sequences are tightly choreographed but never disorienting. The editing lets moments breathe. In earlier Bad Boys films, the camera was a character, always pushing, always proving. Here, it observes, watches, trusts the actors to hold a frame without needing to cut. When Mike stands at his apartment window, shirtless and scarred, the shot lingers just a second longer than expected. Long enough for us to see the doubt, the pain, the man, not the myth. And let's talk about the action itself, not just what happens, but how it happens. The motorcycle and sidecar chase through the Miami causeways is pure chaos, but look closer. The lighting is all dusk, streaked with gold. The camera flips and rolls, but always finds Mike's face. His focus. His rage. Later, during the club infiltration scene, strobe lights pulse to the beat of tension. It's not just flashy, it's orchestrated. The gunfire has rhythm. The angles are math. Every shot feels planned, yet immediate. In scenes like these, Havert's cinematography borrows from music videos and noir in equal measure. There's smoke. There's symmetry. And in the fortress finale, there's something almost mythic. When fire bursts from behind stone walls, when Mike walks through smoke to confront Armando, it's not realism. It's cinema distilled to its core. Archetype meets atmosphere. But the beauty of Bad Boys for Life is that it never drowns in its aesthetics. The style serves the story. Always. It sharpens the emotional arc rather than masking it. And it's in the little things. Like the color red, used sparingly, but with power. Red glows behind Isabel's silhouette. It streaks across the frame when Armando strikes. It marks blood, fire, family. And every time it appears, it signals danger, not just physical, but emotional. Even the wardrobe tells a story. Mike's fashion remains impeccable. Custom suits, leather jackets, always crisp. It's his armor, his mask. Meanwhile, Marcus opts for softness. Loose-fitting polos, warm colors. He's not trying to impress anymore. He's trying to live. The contrast is visual, but it's also thematic. Mike is still performing. Marcus is already letting go. Then there's the sound. Oh, the sound. Cinematically, Bad Boys for Life uses silence like a weapon. The score, crafted with tension and texture, dips out at key moments, letting ambient noise take over. The buzz of a street lamp. The crack of a knuckle. The whisper of fabric when a gun is raised. These aren't filler. They're feeling. They put you inside the scene, make you feel like you're there. When the music does kick in, during fights, During flashbacks, it pulses with weight. Latin percussion, digital layers, mournful horns. It's not just soundtracking the moment. It's speaking it. And that's the thread running through all of this. Nothing is just set dressing. Nothing is just color or light or lens. Every choice in Bad Boys for Life, from location to lighting to costume to sound, is about connection. About past and present. About two men coming to terms with what they built and what they lost. The setting doesn't just frame that story. It amplifies it. It makes it real. In the end, what you remember about this film isn't just the action or the jokes or the big twist. You remember the glow of Miami at dusk. The silence of a hospital hallway. The echo of footsteps in a fortress of stone. You remember how it felt. Because Bad Boys for Life isn't just a ride. It's a return. To character. To story. To place. And in every frame, the city breathes with them. Grows with them. Reminds them, and us, that some stories don't just take place. They live. Some movies are built like clockwork, precision, order, predictability. Bad Boys for Life, 2020, wasn't one of those movies. It was more like jazz. Loud. Improvisational. Risky. And deeply, unshakably alive. To step onto that set wasn't just to witness a production. It was to walk into a reunion, a resurrection, and sometimes a three-ring circus held together by laughter, sweat, and the kind of chemistry that only time and battle testing can forge. From the very first day of filming, there was a weight in the air. Expectation, sure, but also reverence. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence hadn't been on screen together in these roles since 2003. The world had changed. They had changed. The script had passed through multiple rewrites, studios had juggled directors, and everyone on set knew this. This third film had to land. Not just because fans were watching, but because they were watching themselves. Older. Smarter. Maybe even a little scared. But the moment Will and Martin stepped onto set, first scene, car doors swinging open, that rhythm in their walk, you could feel it in the crew. This wasn't a reboot. It was a homecoming. One of the first things the cast did before shooting began was hold what Lawrence dubbed the recharge dinner. No scripts. No executives. Just the core team, sitting down over Cuban food in Miami, talking. About the last 25 years. About what these characters meant. About what it meant to grow older in real time and still be called Bad Boys. Smith gave a toast that reportedly ended in tears, his and then everyone else's. We owe it to these characters, he said, to show that growth isn't weakness. It's the point. From that moment on, the vibe on set was a blend of reverence and total unpredictability. The Belgian directing duo, Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah, brought uncontainable energy. They shot like they were on a ticking clock, not because of time constraints, but because they were on fire. Every take had variations. They shot scenes from impossible angles. One time, Fallah jumped on a moving dolly to get a low swoop around Smith and Lawrence during a gunfight, holding the monitor in one hand, shouting, "It's alive! Keep rolling." Smith loved it. They shoot like fans, he said. Like they're still amazed to be doing this. And that reminded me to stay amazed too. Martin Lawrence, more methodical, often acted as the emotional compass. Between takes, while the directors huddled with the crew, Martin would sit with the younger cast members, Paula Nunez, Charles Melton, Vanessa Hudgens, and share stories. Lessons. Tips. He kept things loose but grounded. When Hudgens confessed she was nervous filming her first big shootout scene, Lawrence told her, "Nerves mean it matters. Don't kill them. Just teach them to listen." One of the biggest challenges came early in production during the Ammo HQ shoot. The set, built in an actual converted tech lab in Atlanta, was packed with working screens, blinking server lights, and dozens of moving parts. In the middle of a complex tracking shot, Rita walking across the room while briefing the team, A rogue drone, used for real-time camera footage, flew too low and clipped one of the light rigs. Sparks flew. The shot was ruined. But instead of panicking, Will Smith shouted, "We got drones acting like divas now," and the entire crew burst into laughter. The directors leaned into the chaos. "Use it," Adil said. "This set is tech. Let the glitches be part of it." They reblocked the scene, incorporated the malfunction into the pacing, and turned a setback into a texture. Another hurdle came during the nightclub scene, one of the film's most visually complex sequences. It involved strobe lights, a coordinated shootout, slow-motion sequences, and dozens of extras. But on the night of filming, the fire marshal nearly shut it down. The strobes had triggered an alarm system that no one knew was still connected. The entire building had to be cleared. Production halted for hours. Spirits dipped. Then Martin Lawrence walked into the middle of the empty club, grabbed the DJ mic, and started doing stand-up. No cameras. No pressure. Just Martin, under emergency lights, doing bits about club culture, bad drinks, and aging hips. Within minutes, cast, crew, and extras were howling. Tension broken. Scene rescheduled. That's how they got through the rough days, not with silence, but with laughter. Will Smith, ever the showman, kept things light too. He created a game called Boomline, where whoever could come up with the best improvised action movie one-liner during a shootout won a steak dinner. It led to gems like "You can't spell funeral without fun" and "You brought a gun to a dad joke fight." The best part? One of those lines actually made it into the movie. You can hear it just before Marcus dives behind cover in the final shootout. The fight choreography was no joke either. Will insisted on doing as many of his stunts as insurance would allow. He trained with tactical teams for weeks, learning how to move more like a seasoned, slowed-down version of Mike Lowry. One particular move, a disarm and sweep during the fortress fight, was so difficult that it had to be filmed in 3 segments and stitched together in editing. But Smith nailed the final spin, and when he did, the stunt crew applauded. "Still got it," someone shouted. "He never lost it," said someone else. Emotionally, though, the hardest scene to film was the hospital sequence. Mike, unconscious. Marcus praying. Silence. The original script had more dialogue, more movement. But when they shot it, the directors told Martin, "Don't act. Just be." And so he stood there, hand trembling, eyes locked on his friend's still body. No lines. Just presence. The take ran long. No one called "cut" for several extra seconds. Everyone on set was still. It was the soul of the film, captured in real time. And then there was the beach. The final scene wasn't supposed to be the last one shot. But schedules shifted. Suddenly, it was. The day was perfect. Sky wide open. Waves steady. Will and Martin sat on that stretch of sand, saying goodbye not just to characters, but to 25 years of shared history. When the directors shouted, "That's a wrap," the crew clapped. And then, slowly, the cast clapped too. A long, lingering round of applause. For the movie. For the moment. For the journey. Behind the scenes, Bad Boys for Life wasn't just a production. It was a living, breathing family reunion. A team rediscovering its rhythm. A set that buzzed not with ego, but with gratitude. There were setbacks. Missteps. Missed cues. But every challenge, every delay, every night shoot in Miami heat was met with grit, grace, and the unshakable belief that they were building something that mattered. Because this wasn't just a movie. It was a return. To characters that felt like home. To friendships that never really ended. And to the truth that behind every explosion, every quip, every bullet-dodging escape, there are people. Laughing. Arguing. Trying. And in that trying, they made something unforgettable. Together. Sometimes a film hides its truth beneath speed, under the noise of car chases and the percussion of gunfire. It moves fast, makes you laugh, drops your jaw with spectacle, and then somewhere along the way you realize it's been whispering to you the whole time. That was the secret of Bad Boys for Life, 2020. Beneath its swagger, beneath its leather jackets and neon-lit standoffs, it was about something far more tender. It was a movie about aging, legacy, redemption, and the aching possibility of change. And the symbols, quiet as they were, spoke volumes. Let's begin where the film begins. Movement from the opening scene, we are reminded that speed is identity in the Bad Boys universe. Mike Lowry's car slices through Miami like a scalpel, with Marcus Burnett gripping the door handle in familiar panic. But unlike past films, this isn't a chase. It's a birth. Marcus's daughter has just given birth to his grandson. And so we're introduced not with death, but with life. The rush isn't pursuit, it's purpose. Right there, without saying it, the film tells us its thesis. This is no longer about adrenaline for adrenaline's sake. It's about what comes after. What gets left behind. The first major theme, and perhaps the deepest, is legacy. Mike Lowry has always been defined by his invincibility. Clean suits, fast cars, never a hair out of place, never a moment of self-doubt. But from the moment he takes a bullet and hits the ground, that myth shatters. He's not untouchable. He's not eternal. And when he wakes up in a hospital bed, there's a shot of his reflection in the window, distorted, framed by wires and monitors. It's not accidental. That image is his first confrontation with mortality. With the question he's never asked, if I die tomorrow, what did I leave behind? Marcus, by contrast, is ready to pass the torch. He sees his grandson, sees a future he doesn't need to dominate, and he's content to step back. But Mike isn't there yet. That tension, between a man ready to rest and a man desperate to remain relevant, is the emotional engine of the story. Their friendship becomes the battleground of that theme. And the film never lets either side win. Instead, it forces them both to find balance. To walk into the future not alone, but together. The second theme pulses like a shadow throughout the film. The past always returns. That theme, explored through character and plot, is brought to life most literally through Armando, the assassin on a mission who turns out to be Mike's son. It's not just a twist. It's the personification of every mistake Mike tried to bury. Armando is sleek, brutal, silent, like a younger version of Mike, without the warmth. He's what Mike might have become if love hadn't found him through Marcus. And his existence unearths the most painful truth of all, that even our deepest secrets, the ones we think we've outrun, are still alive. Waiting, watching, and sometimes growing up with a gun in their hand. This father-son dynamic, wrapped in betrayal and violence, isn't framed as melodrama. It's handled with tragic inevitability. Mike, who spent a career controlling chaos, now has to face something he can't shoot or drive away from, responsibility. Not just for his past, but for the consequences of it. That's where the next theme emerges, redemption. But not the kind that comes in grand gestures. Not the save the day, earn forgiveness kind. No, the redemption in Bad Boys for Life is quieter, harder. It comes in hesitation, in choosing not to kill, in conversations that sting more than bullets. When Mike looks into Armando's eyes and says, "I didn't know, but I'm here now," it isn't a plea. It's surrender. It's a man stripped of all pretense, offering only his regret. Symbolism underscores these moments. Take the use of mirrors and reflections. In almost every pivotal emotional beat, characters are shown with reflections, sometimes in glass, sometimes in water, sometimes in the eyes of another. It's subtle, but persistent. Mike sees himself distorted. Marcus sees himself laughing with his grandson, the light soft and blurry. Even Isabel, the film's shadowy antagonist, is introduced behind a veil, her reflection splintered by prison glass. These are not just framing devices. They're visual metaphors. They tell us that none of these characters are whole. They are fractured, projecting who they want to be while haunted by who they were. Color, too, is wielded with intention. The early scenes are drenched in warm golds and oranges, symbols of comfort, family, connection. The hospital scenes are dim, shot with soft blues, almost like a spiritual in-between. But the scenes with Armando and Isabel are coded in black and red. Black for secrets, red for blood, for vengeance, for legacy twisted into something violent. One of the most symbolic scenes takes place during the ambush on AMMO. As bullets fly, Mike and Marcus are separated, both pinned down, both calling out to each other. In the chaos, they use each other's names like anchors. There's a moment where they lock eyes through the smoke. No lines, just connection. That scene, visually chaotic, is emotionally precise. It says, even when everything's falling apart, we still see each other. And then there's the beach. The final shot of Mike and Marcus, sitting in silence, staring at the horizon, is more than a wrap-up. It's a symbol of arrival. They've survived the wreckage, not just physically, but emotionally. The ocean, infinite and indifferent, becomes a metaphor for the future, for possibility, for the idea that maybe, just maybe, the bad boys don't have to die young to be legends. Another symbol, woven throughout the film, is the idea of time. It appears subtly, in ticking clocks, in countdowns, in references to age. Marcus talks about retiring. Mike jokes about staying young. But time is the one enemy they can't outrun. And so the film makes peace with it. It shows us that time is not a threat, it's a teacher. Every scar, every gray hair, every slowed punch becomes part of the tapestry. Not something to fear, but something to honor. Even AMMO as an organization functions as a symbol, not just of modern policing or younger blood, but of evolution. Rita and her team represent the future, but not in opposition to the past. They blend tactics with empathy, tech with gut instinct. They are the bridge between what was and what's coming. And the moment Mike finally listens to them, finally trusts their methods, that's the moment he begins to grow. That's when the film shifts from being about resistance to being about acceptance. At its core, Bad Boys for Life is about change. It's about what we do when the adrenaline fades. Who we become when the badge isn't enough. It's about reckoning, with the self, with the past, with the people who shaped us and the people we hurt. And in the most unexpected way, it delivers that truth not with speeches, but with choices. Mike chooses not to kill. Armando chooses to listen. Marcus chooses to come back, not for glory, but for love. And the film chooses to let all of that sit in the space between explosions. So yes, there are car chases, shootouts, one-liners. There's the energy and the flash we've come to love. But underneath it all, quietly pulsing, are the questions that matter. What does it mean to grow old in a world that doesn't let heroes age? What happens when you realize the story isn't about you anymore? And can you still be a bad boy if you've finally learned how to be good? Bad Boys for Life doesn't just ask those questions. It earns them. And that's what makes it more than a sequel. That's what makes it a story worth watching twice. Once for the action, and once to hear what it's really saying. Sometimes a film doesn't just show you a story. It moves you through it, frame by frame, like a current pulling you deeper than you expected to go. With Bad Boys for Life, 2020, the pull begins subtly. It's not just the return of iconic characters or the rhythm of nostalgia that hits. It's the craft, the way the camera glides, the sharpness of each cut, the thunderclap of sound that wraps around your spine when the bullets fly, and the sudden stillness that leaves you holding your breath when emotion enters the frame. This was more than just another action movie. It was a showcase of precision and instinct, of old-school swagger meeting new-school skill. Let's start with the most immediate element you feel before a word is even spoken. The visual language. Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah, the young Belgian duo handed the keys to one of the biggest buddy cop franchises in film history, knew exactly what they were doing. They didn't try to mimic Michael Bay's visual bombast, but they didn't ignore it either. Instead, they adapted it, honored it, and then they made it their own. What they built was a hybrid style that borrowed Bay's kinetic madness but injected it with rhythm, patience, and, perhaps most surprisingly, emotion. Cinematographer Robrecht Havert was their partner in this vision. Together, they chose to shoot large portions of the film with handheld cameras and natural lighting, not to cut corners, but to cut closer. To the actors' faces. To their truth. In scenes where Mike Lowry and Marcus Burnett wrestle with mortality and loss, the camera lingers, shaking just enough to remind you this isn't a fantasy. It's grounded, sweaty, human. That intimacy is what sets Bad Boys for Life apart. You feel inside the moment. And yet, when the action erupts, the camera soars. Literally. A defining visual motif of the film is the drone shot, not just overused for spectacle, but woven into the DNA of Ammo's high-tech operation. During chase scenes, especially the stunning pursuit through downtown Miami, drones aren't just narrative tools, they're characters. The camera swoops low to the pavement, zips up staircases, flies through broken windows. It's breathless, but never chaotic. Every movement is blocked like choreography. Every angle chosen not for coolness, but clarity. Take the scene in the nightclub. The colors alone are a masterclass. Neon purples, blues, reds flashing in time with the soundtrack. But it's the camera that tells the story. It snakes through crowds, dances with the actors. When Mike draws his weapon, the focus snaps tight to his face. When the crowd erupts in panic, the lens goes wide, swallowing chaos in controlled frames. Nothing is accidental. Every cut is earned. Editing, done with meticulous rhythm by Dan Lebentel and Peter McNulty, serves as the unseen conductor behind the film's emotional momentum. Fast in action, slow in grief. That's the pattern. Fight sequences are cut with surgical speed. No wasted seconds. But when the emotional weight sets in, like Marcus praying at Mike's hospital bedside, the editors do something brave. They stop. They hold the frame. And in those moments of silence, something almost sacred happens. You stop waiting for the next gunshot. You listen. You lean in. The pacing becomes a kind of storytelling on its own. Not just what happens next, but what lingers in the space between. Sound design, too, isn't just about volume. It's about dimension. Each gunshot in Bad Boys for Life has texture. The crack of metal echoes differently depending on the space. Indoors, it snaps against walls. Outdoors, it thuds with weight. It's designed not just to thrill, but to immerse. A bullet flying past your ear doesn't just scare you, it puts you in the line of fire. During the final showdown at the fortress, sound designer Steve Bodeker layered flame bursts with rumbling echoes and distant screams to create an almost mythic atmosphere. It doesn't sound like a fight. It sounds like war and legacy colliding. The score, composed by Lorne Balfe, knows when to step forward and when to vanish. It's not bombastic. It's aware. In quieter moments, like Marcus debating whether to return to the field, the music slips into melancholy piano motifs, notes that trail off like unfinished sentences. But when the action peaks, it returns with Latin percussion, driving bass, and a tempo that almost mimics a heartbeat. Fast, faster, pause, and then breathe. Set design played a crucial part in shaping mood. The AMMO headquarters is the clean, white glow of the future. It's clinical, calculated. Contrast that with Mike's apartment, dimly lit, crowded with artifacts of a man stuck in time. When Marcus visits, the difference is stark. It's two worlds, past and future, divided by lighting and layout. And then there's the Mexican fortress. Part Gothic nightmare, part ancestral shrine. The crumbling stone, the burning torches, the spiraling staircases, it all feels haunted. Not just by Isabel and her vendetta, but by the ghosts of Mike's past. The structure feels like consequence. Stunt coordination was another pillar. But here, too, it was never just about spectacle. Will Smith and the stunt team worked tirelessly to make the fights age-appropriate. Not boring. Believable. Mike doesn't move like a 30-year-old anymore. He moves like someone carrying 30 years of pain. The punches land harder. The falls take longer to get up from. During rehearsals, the team would tweak scenes mid-shoot to reflect that physical reality. Smith would say, "Let's show them I feel it now." Even wardrobe told a story. Mike's all-black outfits, still tailored and pristine, speak to his obsession with image. Marcus's more relaxed, warm-toned shirts reflect his desire for peace. But it's subtle. The deeper message is that these characters are dressing for the people they want to be, not just who they are. It's costuming with narrative weight. All these choices, visual, sonic, physical, work in tandem. And they don't just build a movie. They build an experience. One that feels slick without being hollow. Stylized without being shallow. And the world noticed. Bad Boys for Life debuted in January 2020, a month not known for box office juggernauts. Expectations were modest. After all, sequels arriving nearly 2 decades later rarely land on both feet. But this one didn't just land, it exploded. Opening weekend, $62 million. Global box office, over $426 million. It became the highest-grossing film in the franchise. It outperformed most predictions. And it did it without superheroes, without a cinematic universe propping it up. Just craft, character, and care. Critics and audiences agreed. It was more than they expected. Smarter, sharper, deeper. And that, perhaps, is the greatest success of all. Not just that the film made money, but why it did. Because behind every frame was a choice. To elevate. To evolve. To take a genre known for chaos and find its soul again. And in doing so, Bad Boys for Life didn't just prove the franchise still had fire. It proved that when filmmakers trust the audience to feel as much as they thrill, that's when movies don't just entertain. They endure. Some casts are assembled. Others are reunited. But every now and then, a cast steps back into frame like they never left, and the magic isn't in the reunion, it's in the continuation. That's what Bad Boys for Life, 2020, captured. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence didn't just return to the roles that made them legends. They walked back into them with weathered ease, like two musicians picking up a beat that had never really stopped playing. But it wasn't just about legacy. It was about evolution. And what unfolded behind the scenes, and in the hearts of audiences, was a testament to how much can be said with a look, a laugh, or the silence between two men who have nothing left to prove, except to themselves. When the film began to take shape, the first calls were always going to Will and Martin. 4 years, both had been dodging rumors about a third Bad Boys movie. The timing never felt right. The scripts never felt ready. But then came Adil and Bilall, the young Belgian directors with a fresh vision and relentless passion. Will later said in an interview, it wasn't just a script. It was a reason. A reason to go back. A reason to go forward. That mattered. Because for him, and for Martin, these weren't just characters. They were versions of themselves, locked in amber, waiting to be cracked open. Martin Lawrence had his reservations. He'd taken a step back from the spotlight. He was older, quieter, more deliberate in what he wanted to do. But something about this story, the idea of exploring what happens when the invincible starts to feel vulnerable, spoke to him. Marcus was always the heart, he said, in a sit-down with Entertainment Tonight. And I think I needed to know that the heart still mattered. That he still had something to say. And he did. Armando's presence gave the film weight, complexity. It turned the usual chase into something more intimate. Mike wasn't just chasing a criminal. He was chasing the version of himself he never got to know, the legacy he never meant to create. And every bullet, every punch, carried that haunting question. What happens when the villain is part of you? In contrast, Marcus carried the other half of the story. He represented peace. Not the absence of danger, but the choice to walk away from it. He wanted slippers and story time, not shootouts. But what made Marcus powerful in this film wasn't just his retreat, it was his return. His decision to step back into the fire, not for glory, but for love. For brotherhood. For the belief that some battles still need to be fought, even if only to pull someone you care about back from the edge. Together, they walked a different kind of path this time. Not just toward resolution, but toward redefinition. Alongside them, we met a new generation, AMMO. Rita, Kelly, Dorn, Rafe. These weren't replacements. They were reflections. They brought technology, teamwork, and a different kind of intensity. Where Mike once trusted only instinct, they brought strategy. Where Marcus once charged in headfirst, they showed patience. The old ways met the new, and instead of colliding, they converged. And the film made space for both. Behind the scenes, the story was just as remarkable. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence didn't just act, they anchored this film with their presence. Off camera, they were leaders, mentors, storytellers. Every day on set was a blend of history and reinvention. The young cast looked to them, not with fear, but with trust. And they gave it back. This wasn't about handing over a torch. It was about holding it together. Directors Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah brought kinetic vision and reverence. They didn't want to remake Bad Boys. They wanted to evolve it. And that's exactly what they did. From their stylized camera movements to the emotionally charged pacing, every decision was made with love and purpose. The result? A film that feels slick but never hollow. Cool but never cold. We explored the themes, legacy, redemption, consequence, aging, and how they bled through every frame. Not through heavy-handed speeches, but through choices. A gun not fired. A confession spoken. A son spared. These quiet moments became louder than the explosions. And oh, there were explosions. But they were earned. Because the filmmaking, the craft, supported the story at every turn. The color palette told a story of past versus future. The score blended mournful piano with charging bass. The sound design let you feel every room, every impact. Editing built tension not just by speeding up, but by slowing down. And the camera itself felt like a character, swooping, tilting, breathing with the actors. Even the setting had weight. Miami wasn't just backdrop. It was memory. It held them, challenged them, reflected their fire and their flaws. And when the story moved to Mexico, to that ancient fortress, the film shifted from urban crime drama to something almost mythic. Mike wasn't just facing an enemy. He was facing a history. One forged in shadows. Audiences noticed. Critics noticed. And they responded. The reviews called it a surprise, a redemption, a film with more soul than expected. And audiences turned out in droves. Not just for nostalgia, but for closure, for reconnection, for the chance to see that even the most reckless, trigger-happy heroes could grow up and still be legends. In the quiet final scene, when Mike and Marcus sit on the beach, watching the waves stretch toward tomorrow, it's not just a moment of rest. It's a declaration. They're still here, still riding. But now, finally, they understand the road they've traveled. And maybe where it leads next. Bad Boys for Life wasn't about ending a trilogy. It was about finding the beginning inside the ending. About stepping back into a role not because the world asked you to, but because you had something left to say. So if you've come this far with us, you've felt it too. You've seen the layers beneath the laughs. You've heard the truths buried in the gunfire. You've witnessed the transformation not just of a franchise, but of two men who once defined cool, now redefining meaning. And if that resonates with you, if you believe that movies can be more than action, more than noise, more than nostalgia, then you're in the right place. This is what we do here. We dive deep. We peel back the layers. We find the human heartbeat in the cinematic storm. So if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. Join the conversation. Be part of the community that doesn't just watch movies, but feels them. There's more to explore, more stories to unpack, and more truths to find behind the curtain. Because sometimes the loudest stories whisper, and we're here to listen together.